you can't build a product on gut instinct alone. Like you can't have the loudest person who, speaks up in a workshop and says, here are the features I want. This is the product strategy.
According to IBM's recent study of 1,000 businesses and their use of generative and agentic AI, 73% of the businesses they surveyed were not seeing any functional benefit.
But just because they weren't seeing enough value didn't mean value wasn't being created. Enterprises face this unique paradox where if you move too slowly, you risk irrelevance.
And 77% are not seeing any financial benefit. That's a huge amount. To understand what made for successful adoption of AI, IBM took a look at the common characteristics of the companies that were benefiting. Hey, it's the Product Experience, and I'm Lily Smith. And in this episode, digital product engineering and design partner at IBM, Matthew Certner, shares those traits with us so that you can see what foundations need to be in place to be truly successful with AI.
Teams that are maniacally focused on the user and business value are those that are not just high performing, but they produce these like ROI engines.
Hi, Matthew. Welcome to the Product Experience. It's great to have you here today.
Thanks so much. I'm excited to be here.
And we're here at Industry Conference.
We are. It's been great. Cleveland, lovely Cleveland.
I know, lovely Cleveland. And so your talk today was all around how we can build better products or products that matter a lot faster. So we're going to have a chat about that. But before we do, give us a quick intro to who you are and your background and how you ended up in products.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Matt Certner. I lead product engineering for IBM Consulting. I'm responsible for go-to-market across the Americas. I loved coming here because I got to talk about all of the amazing clients I meet with weekly. I mean, we get to see firsthand what those top performers do so well, and also a lot of the challenges that they face with delivering product. So it's just been great to be here and to talk about that, plus to talk about a study that IBM just did around the use of generative and agentic AI in product engineering.
And tell us a little bit about your history. Like, how did you end up in this role at IBM?
So I've been with IBM for 13 years now, and thankfully we were able to meet an amazing company in Dallas called Dialexa. We were able to acquire Dialexa, an IBM company now. And the role has really been about integrated this product-first mindset and this new way of working within IBM Consulting and to meet clients where they are in their product journey.
Mm-hmm. And tell us about this report that you did. Like, how did that come about, and what were some of the surprising results of that report?
Sure, and just to be clear, like I didn't do the report. So the report is from IBM's IBV, Institute for Business Value. It's an amazing organization within IBM. So they did a report that looked at 1,000 product engineering executives and their use of generative and agentic AI in product engineering. And one of the big things that we looked at were a lot of companies were seeing value in the use of Gen AI. Obviously, the value and benefits of generative AI in product engineering is clearly known, but it was a bit mismatched with the expected return on revenue or just any sort of ROI from that investment. So what we saw was like 27% of the companies that we looked at were actually seeing the functional benefits of generative AI, and only 23% were seeing the financial benefits, which is pretty low, right? Surprisingly low. So we wanted to, obviously dive deeper into that, but just because they weren't seeing enough value didn't mean value wasn't being created. So we wanted to dive a little bit closer and just really understand the why and to help them stretch as much value as they can, as much ROI as they can through product engineering.
So what was the thing that was different about presumably there's some sort of correlation between seeing the functional benefits and seeing the financial benefits. Was that kind of heavily correlated, or was there like a...
Yeah, it was heavily correlated, and a lot had to do with the behaviors of the product teams themselves.
Right.
And that was what I was hoping, and I'm glad that I was able to speak to that, here in the conference. Teams and there's the key behaviors to teams that make them more high performing, more likely to see greater, ROI out of product engineering.
Yeah.
There was a large gap in the study. The top performing teams, the top 20% of those 1,000 that we interviewed, they were seeing ROI upwards of 60%.
Right.
And then if we took the median of all the other companies that we looked at, they were seeing a return closer to 36%. Right. That gap is substantial. Yeah. So when we meet with customers, the first thing we need to understand is, where do they sit in that spectrum of value, and what can we help them do differently to achieve, 60% or ideally even higher than 60%.
And what were the
reasons?
Yeah, what were the reasons? Let's get to the the meat of the matter straight away.
It's the behaviors of the team. It was unbelievable at how much these behaviors, when they were really robustly adopted by clients, how much higher they saw in number return, whether it's revenue, whether it was adoption rate, like, whatever obviously KPI that they were aligned to. But it was teams that were flexible, teams that were delivering with these targeted and incremental approaches, teams that were data-led, and teams that were cross-functional.
Okay.
And a lot of that sounds like, a little self-explanatory, right? Like, I need a cross-functional, multidisciplinary team. But it was amazing how many teams didn't robustly adopt these, not just throughout the entire, like, not just having all four, obviously, but through every, phase of the product development lifecycle.
It's interesting because my assumption would be something around like, teams that sort of are curious and kind of embrace change or are innovative or something like that. But what you're describing just sounds like, how just a normal high-performing team would work, like not one that has to, adopt new technologies really fast.
I think that's why you need all four. So, I think there's now almost an over-reliance on generative AI and the new technologies, and you need to obviously use them to be successful, right? Like, analysts think, we looked at a study, analysts saw between 600 and 800 million new products are going to be developed by the end of 2026. Like, that is a staggering number. Yeah. And if you're going to compete with that, which, by the way, of that number, I guarantee you, like, close to like 90-95% of those products are going to fail.
Yeah.
Yes, you have a high-performing team, but a team can't be over-reliant on the technology. You need to use the tools and technology, the accelerators, the generative and agentic AI that's made available to you, but you have to use it with intent. Mm-hmm. And teams that are not maniacally focused on the user and business value, they're the ones that are going to fail. The teams that are maniacally focused on the user and business value are those that are not just high performing, but they produce these like ROI engines, right? They're like continuously producing user value. They're checking out revenue. They're actually becoming this engine for continuous growth and profitable growth.
Let's dig into the four different characteristics a little bit. So I think the first one you mentioned was flexibility.
Yep.
What does flexibility look like in a team, and how do you think that kind of supports like people experimenting with Gen AI or being more successful with it?
Teams need to be able to just adapt in general. And again, like, we talk a little bit of that being a little bit self-explanatory with product teams, but too many times they aren't willing to listen to their customers. They're not pivoting based on feedback that they're receiving. You need to be able to change those standards, processes and ways of working to react to what the market is actually saying. And what's interesting is if you actually think about generative AI, right? AI models in general need to be flexible, right? Like, that's inherently what shapes its value. So, flexible teams that are willing to really know their customer, teams that can put stuff into production, listen, pivot again. Like, those are the teams that are actually chugging out more revenue.
Okay, so they're responding to change really quickly, basically.
Very quickly.
And what was the second one?
Second one's targeted and, incremental and targeted.
Incremental and targeted. Okay, so what does that really mean?
You can't deliver everything all at once.
Right.
I see this time and again with clients, right? Like, you have this huge product, this huge project, and you just want to start going at it and start delivering it. You need to break it apart in bite-sized pieces of value. And we can talk a little bit about something called the golden thread. I did present that on stage. But teams that can deliver bite-sized pieces, put stuff into production, start to test that with users, like I mentioned before, but start to see the value, let the user start to see the value, let your investors start to see the value, they're more successful because they're breaking it apart. They're maniacally focused. There's purpose to what they're delivering and when they're delivering it.
So it's that doing the smallest thing that gets ships value fast.
Sometimes, yes. Sometimes it's those quick wins. If you think about that grid, right? Like, sometimes you need to prioritize things based on impact and feasibility, and you need to make sure that you're prioritizing things not just based on what's the most impactful, but also what's feasible. Like, how can you do something in a 13 weeks, like a program increment, right? Or like, how can you break something apart and say, hey, we're going to do this over the course of the year, and here's what that product looks like, and have more transparency and traceability in what you're developing.
Yeah. And how do you think that supports people, or how do you think that facilitates people being more successful with AI?
I think it aligns everyone on what's possible, not just the art of the possible, but again, what's feasible with the tools and technologies that's available.
Right.
When you are able to break something apart in like a 13-week increment, or say, hey, here's what the product is that we're building, and here's the vision, the value, and the roadmap of how we're going to get there. and you have the boardroom, you have your engineers, you have your developers, you have your users, everyone is aligned on what it is you're building, you're de-risking innovation. Right? You're de-risking the product engineering process because everyone is aligned on the North Star vision. And we're de-risking it because we're breaking it apart in each of those chunks, and we're going to go deliver it one after another.
Yeah, and I guess it's not that whole thing of like, okay, let's all go away and learn AI for 6 months.
You can't deliver AI for AI's sake type of mentality.
Yeah, okay. And number 3 was?
Data-led.
Data-led, okay. I mean, everyone wants to be data-led, don't they? But let's go straight. I think everyone will understand what data-led means who's listening to the podcast. Hopefully they do. But why do you think the data-led teams tend to be more successful with AI?
I had someone here in the conference who came up to me and was talking about the HIPPO in their organization.
Yeah.
They're like, the HIPPO does this, the HIPPO does that. The highest paid person's opinion. Yeah. You can't build a product on gut instinct alone. Like, you can't have the loudest person who, speaks up in a workshop and says, here are the features I want. This is the product strategy. You have to use quantifiable data to draw insights. And these insights are then what you're going to use to refine your features or reprioritize your backlog or create your product strategy, right? So I think data, understanding data and the use of AI models, I think that's well understood. Like, you can't have AI if you don't have strong data. But I don't think enough people realize the importance of capturing, going through the discovery and the design process to have real data that you can draw insights from in order to make a successful product.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, okay, data-led, I'm all with you on that one. Number 4?
Cross-functional.
Cross-functional. I mean, I kind of feel like there's no point in talking about that, but let's talk about it anyway.
No, you need a multidisciplinary team. Yeah. Representation across the business. They just move faster. And we saw this with the top performers. And this is why I said robust adoption of all 4 versus we have this, right? We have 1 or 2, or, we're flexible and we have cross-functional, but, our data is horrible, right? So the robust adoption of all 4 of these are what led to the higher, the highest ROI, the high performing teams.
And was there anything else that really stood out or kind of didn't quite make it into the final report or the final data, but was a bit of a thread on, maybe it's also this other thing that's making these businesses more successful?
We looked a little bit at the challenges. The full report, by the way, is available online through the IBV. Really great report. But if you looked at the challenges of what prevented companies from successfully using it or scaling generative and agentic AI in product engineering, you had things like them being, technically stretched or prioritization overload or capability constraints, right? Like these traits that a company just can't get past in order to successfully apply it. So those were looked at, but what I was really interested in, and the reason I saw such value from this report, was the behavioral element to it, right? Like, everyone talks about the value of generative AI and agentic AI. Like, we can talk all day about that. But the fact that the team's behavior and dynamic and makeup can have such a significant, sway in terms of how much value you're getting out of Gen AI was the wow factor for me, right? So everyone should use the technology. Again, I'll say it again, right? Like, if you're not using generative and agentic AI in product engineering, you're gonna fall behind, right? But you have to be focused. You have to be maniacally focused on that user and business value. And I think putting that together and having teams that then represent those 4 behaviors plus a focus, embodying something that we like to call value orchestration, which again is prioritizing the right thing to build the product. We say you build the right product, you build the product right, and you make the product successful.
And that's the value orchestration?
That's actually Dilex's kind of go-to saying, which I love, right? Because those are like the 3 key elements of it. Value orchestration is that continuous process that you have in, fully embedded in product development that allows you to align all of your features, capabilities, direction, vision with real results, real value. It keeps value at the forefront of everything you do.
And you mentioned earlier something about a golden thread.
The golden thread, yeah.
Tell us about that. The
golden thread is one of my favorite artifacts at IBM. We deliver this, time and again with clients, usually in the design and discovery phase, but it's a living document. It stays continuous throughout the, the program. At its heart, it's a visual representation of the North Star of what you're building. So think of your product. Don't think of a journey map, though. I get that a lot. Someone's always like, that it's just a journey map. A golden thread shows the vision, the value, And then there's always this feedback loop that allows customers, that allows your employees, your developers, everyone to just iterate upon it to ensure we're flexible and ensure that we're always building the right product. So I could talk a little bit more about the golden thread. Actually, I have a story about the golden thread too.
Yeah,
Don't let me
tell
forget.
us a story. Tell us a story.
But the reason the last thing I want to say with the golden thread is the reason it's so impactful and the reason I wanted to share it today at the conference is it's a low cost, easy way of adopting, something tangible that allows teams to rally around at the same time, make sure that they're focused on value.
Right.
Teams no longer will just debate features. They'll actually rally together around outcomes. And that's huge, right? Aligning on outcomes over just features and capabilities.
That does sound, that's the ideal, isn't it?
That is the idea.
Yeah.
So
Tell us a story about
Sure.
the golden thread.
I told it today. So I had a client in Dallas. By the way, before COVID, we used to print them. They weren't just digital, like really print them, 30, 40 feet long, like huge,
Wow.
like Kinko's loved us. That's FedEx.
Okay.
Okay. And this one client in Dallas had their golden thread like very proudly and prominently displayed in their product development space. And we were working on a feature for this company that within like a 5-mile radius of Dallas could recommend the right product bundle that would most likely sell that product. Okay. Well, I wake up one morning, I go in the office and there's this big red sticky note, like right onto that feature. And it was, no, we can't do this. Like we can't build this feature. We don't have the data. And then I remember it was right after lunch that someone else slapped a new sticky note right over theirs that's like, I have the data, come see me. I sit on the 5th floor.
Oh, amazing.
And we talk Gen AI and the value of Gen AI all day, but you can't dismiss the human interaction element.
Yeah.
You can't dismiss the value of design thinking, of sticky notes and whiteboards. And again, to my comment, it brings this traceability and transparency in product development. And if that wasn't there, we wouldn't have been able to get through that and to build this product that was really incredible to this company.
I do feel like that's probably also one of the things that's kind of key to being successful with this is that transparency in an organization and people really being able to see each other's work and share each other's learnings with like what different teams are doing, experimenting with AI and different AI tooling.
Yeah, absolutely. The co-location element, I'd like to see more of that even, now post-COVID, the virtual teams and Mural and, obviously that all works. But there's nothing like the co-location and the real, teams kind of sitting together to really innovate and build product.
Yeah, exactly. So tell us a little bit about how you as IBM work with some of these companies that are not seeing the value and how you might encourage them or support them in, making that transition and getting more value out of Gen AI or just like evaluating how they're working.
Yeah, a lot of companies will come to us, at different phases of their journey, not just in product, but in AI, right? Like, especially when generative AI really kind of became a thing, a lot of clients were like, I want that, right? Like, how do we do that? How do we start to test ideas? I don't necessarily know what I want to build, but how do we work with you to start to build out a value backlog, a idea of use cases, opportunity canvases to say, hey, this is going to draw this value. I want to work with IBM to build this, this product. Or companies come to us and say, hey, we have a product. It's a working product, but we have no, user adoption is extremely low, right? Like no one's using it. Why not? Or they come to us and they say, hey, we have this great product. Now we need help scaling it. So there's a lot of entry points in how you could do business with IBM, of course. I think the most interesting, to your point with the value, is when customers aren't necessarily seeing the value that they expected out of generative AI, out of agentic AI, out of the product that they're putting into market. So when we meet with customers, the first thing we do is look at that, right? What is the KPIs you're looking to achieve? What is success? Who are your customers? How do we help you ensure that we're delivering value to your organization or to your customers?
And do you get each of those businesses, would you get each of those businesses now to kind of assess themselves on the 4 different, flexibility, incremental and targeted? Let's see if I can remember the other 2.
Data-led, cross-functional.
Thank you, yeah. Do you get them to do a bit of an assessment so that you know where they're at and then you can kind of help them on that side? Or is it just a more kind of generic, understanding that organization? Yeah,
I think it's a little bit more, that's definitely a part of it. We look at the actual, makeup of the organization. We look at the digital change element of an organization. What potentially is not making a product successful, or why aren't they seeing value? We don't do any sort of formalized assessment in that. That would be a part of our discovery work or product strategy work. But it definitely plays into, how we help them, start to draw revenue or ROI from the work that they're doing.
And one of the other things that you talked about, which was kind of like a blocker for exploring Gen AI or getting more value from it, was prioritization and just not having enough time.
Yeah.
How do you feel about those businesses? Because it does feel like, is that really the case? Or is it a case of you're just not making the time? Or what do you think
making the time to prioritize?
Yeah, or making the time to prioritize. And then, there's a few businesses that I've spoken to on the podcast where they're like, we just stopped everything. And we were like, we need to rethink our whole strategy because Gen AI or AI in general and the advances in AI are going to come at us like a tidal wave.
Yeah.
And we need to have our eyes open and kind of watch it coming and ride that wave rather than just ignore it and carry on doing what we're doing and then try and make space for exploring AI later on in, the evolution of the business or whatever it is.
No, my favorite yesterday was the story about the CEO came in and was like, stop everything. We're doing AI now, right?
Yeah.
You have to. Enterprises face this unique paradox where if you move too slowly, you risk irrelevance, right? Like you miss the market, you're done. Your product's not going to work. If you move too quickly, though, without any sort of clarity or direction, then you're just risking pouring millions of hours or even worse, millions of dollars into development.
Yeah.
So you have to prioritize. You have to be really thoughtful about prioritizing not just by impact but feasibility to ensure that you're building the right thing for a reason. Because if you spend all your time, let's say you pivot and you go into AI, right? Or that one use case with that CEO, and they just start pushing out use cases. Sure, one or a few may get lucky, but you're not building anything for a reason, right? You're not building something with the end user in mind. You're not building something that has clear ROI that's tied to it or a business case that's tied to it. And that's why it's important to go through the right steps, go through the right discovery, build that business case, have value orchestration, and then most importantly, to build it with the user in mind, right? The user and business in mind so that you're actually able to draw some ROI from the work you do.
Mm-hmm. And just going back to the golden thread as well, which you mentioned, that some of it was or some of them were 30 and 40 feet long when you printed them off.
Yeah.
What's actually on that document?
Yeah. So the reason they're long is you actually want to start to have some vision of what the product looks like, right? The screens, the makeup, but you need to have enough data on there for it to actually be useful. And that's why I said it's not just this journey map. So you can have the features and the capabilities clearly shown, but you have to have the tracks underneath it. So you have to show the value. You have to show what the persona or the customer's interaction is with that product. You should be able to look at a feature and say, it's going to bring this much ROI to your organization. So when you're meeting with your teams or if you're meeting with your product owner or product manager, or even better, if you're meeting with the board to get approval for funding, you're able to say to them, hey, these capabilities that we're going to put into production now, they're going to generate this much value. And that's what's key there. And then there's that technical layer that starts to show the complexities or the integrations that are needed or the APIs. And it just starts to become this roadmap that you can use to build a product.
So these are really long because they're for big, complex enterprise organizations?
Not necessarily. And by the way, not too long. So if you build the Golden Gate Bridge, then then we go to that targeted and incremental, right?
Yeah.
So your golden thread needs to stay targeted and incremental. It needs to be feasible. It needs to have the bite-sized pieces of value. You want to make sure it's achievable and it generates the expected return on your investment.
And it does, I was going to say as well, because it does sound like the kind of thing that is hard to keep up to date if there's so much information all in one place.
It's a living document. I mean, well, now we could talk sustainability if you don't want to keep reprinting it. That's why sticky notes and, we start to, have it as a living document.
Yeah.
It's so digital now with Figma and, with so many great, amazing tools to start to make this a living document. Everyone can have it on their, saved on their desktop and they can have it on their phone and, it becomes this, hey, look at this amazing thing that we're building. You could start to use it to show to your customers. You could use it with marketing and it becomes a really, great artifact to use in product development.
Amazing. And can people find an example of that online as well?
Not online. They are very tailored. They're very specific. They're custom. The one I presented today was almost like an infographic.
Yeah.
But, anybody can have a golden thread. I talked about low cost, easy ways to adopt. I hope that those I spoke to today implement some element of that, value orchestration. By the way, value orchestration, though, is a lot more complex than, slapping sticky notes of intended value. But it's a really good start to an organization that wants to, track the features that they're building in a product with, intended ROI.
Yeah.
But IBM could absolutely, build a golden thread for any organization. It doesn't necessarily need to be these massive, complex, things. It's anything that can start to pull together a vision for a product that wants to see the value, the technical layer and the feedback from the clients or the customers.
Yeah. I feel like there's definitely like an article there, like a blog post there for you to just like talk people through how to create it and share that template. I think that would be awesome.
Just clarification, we don't necessarily like just sell golden threads though. It's a component of how we do design and discovery, and it's a really best practice in terms of delivery.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then also you mentioned you worked at IBM Garage?
IBM Garage, yeah.
Garage.
Garage, UK, US. Yes.
Tell us about that.
So I lead IBM Garage for the Americas still. A lot of the ways IBM Garage's evolution has been into digital product engineering. Garage is about delivering the speed of a startup, but at the scale of an enterprise within IBM, right? Small, especially with IBM. A lot of people don't think, small startup type mentality.
Yeah.
There's 3 phases. There's co-create, co-execute, co-operate. So co-creation is about that design and discovery, right? How do we ensure we're building the right product, meeting with customers, creating the right, backlog of opportunities, starting to test those opportunities, not even in the build phase yet. I'm talking about prototypes, golden threads, user research, meeting with the actual end user customers. Then you move into co-execute, which is the next phase. This is about building the product right, building, more clickable prototypes or even MVPs to prove the product market fit. Mm-hmm. We want to ensure that we're not, wasting time or money if there's not a product that's actually going to generate revenue for a company.
Is this if an enterprise company wants to explore a new business or like sector or something like that?
Absolutely. Okay. It's also with AI, right? When generative AI came in, right, everyone wanted these AI labs. How do I rapidly beat everyone to the market and start testing different use cases? The Garage was extremely, beneficial there because we had a huge backlog of Gen AI use cases. We were rapidly building business cases for them, like opportunity canvases, starting to build prototypes to put into the hands of their employees. Mm-hmm. How do you drive productivity? I mean, with AI, the whole game is productivity savings. Mm-hmm. And IBM has been doing an amazing part in productivity savings. We've saved $3.5 billion in productivity savings at the bottom line using generative and agentic AI. Mm-hmm. We have a golden thread for that. Nice. But if you're coming in and you want to invest in productivity, if you want to invest in generative and agentic AI, again, you need to make sure you're de-risking innovation, and having some sort of agile, safe process to do that is important. And at IBM, that's the Garage approach.
So it's kind of like an innovation lab.
Yeah, it's our innovation lab.
So I worked as a head of innovation in a company. It was a 200-person company. And the way that we did it was I had no team, but I basically pulled people in from across the business on certain initiatives that I was running, which I think worked really well because then you had all of the knowledge from the business and also all of the opportunity for people in the business who were interested in working in a slightly different way and playing around with things, basically, were able to then come together on a particular initiative that we were doing. Like, does that work in the same way in big enterprise organizations when they want to do innovation? Because obviously there's so much knowledge and experience within the kind of the core teams. I'd love to know how you kind of bring that into an innovation environment.
Especially a company as large as IBM, having that innovative team and the fourth characteristic, right? Cross-functional, multidisciplinary teams. The Garage cut through all of IBM. Right. So if we're meeting with a client, we're meeting them where they are, we're looking at what they're looking to solve, we're bringing the best of IBM together. You mentioned the word core, which I actually like, because we would always have that core team that knows the client, knows the industry, to really deliver value to the client. But then we also had this concept of flex staffing. So we can bring in the right individual at the right time of a product, or not the product, right time of a project, to ensure that we are able to deliver whatever that client challenges. And with IBM Garage, and now even with digital product engineering with Dialexa, we are doing the same thing. We're bringing the smaller group of IBMers together, co-located or virtual, to deliver for our clients.
So where do you see things going? Like how are the teams that are doing well going to keep doing well? How are the teams that are failing? Are they going to be able to adjust, or are we going to see like big businesses like just not adjusting and then failing? Like, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, let's go back to that, that stat I gave you. 600 to 800 million new products are going to be developed by the end of 2026. Everyone's building, product now. Everyone's in the product business. If you're not, you're going to start to fail. I don't care if you're in finance, HR, supply chain, like you're in the product business now. If they're not competing in that space, if they're not using generative and agentic AI, but if they're not doing it maniacally focused on business and user value, they're going to fail. 95% of those 600 to 800 million products are going to fail. So companies obviously need to innovate, but they need to innovate with purpose, right?
So 600 to 800 million new products. Wait, in the next couple of years?
By the end of 2026.
Okay, so in less than a couple of years, in just over a year. I mean, it does feel like probably some of those, or maybe a lot of them, are going to be a bit crap.
90 to 95%, I'm thinking you need to be maniacally focused on user and business value.
Yeah.
And companies are becoming too over-reliant on the tools and technologies. You need to use them to be successful. That's clear.
Do you think that there's going to be this huge wave, and then the best the teams that are able to be maniacally focused on the customer and create products that are actually useful, valuable, creating business and customer value, they will kind of bubble up and they'll be great.
Absolutely.
And then we'll kind of like slow down a bit in terms of like the rate at which new products are introduced to the world? Or do you think it's still gonna, have that massive number? I'm thinking this really reminds me of like, when we introduced mobile phones, and then suddenly everyone could take a picture all the time, anywhere. And so like, if you look on your phone, probably 99% of the photos that you've taken are rubbish.
Yeah.
And then also podcasts, like, there was a huge wave of podcasts that were, like us. We were riding that wave of people creating podcasts, and probably like 99% of them failed or were not very good, or just had, quite small, very niche audiences, perhaps. Do you see the same kind of pattern happening? And actually, I wonder whether, I don't even know, like we obviously haven't slowed down in taking photos.
Yeah.
That's stayed the same. We probably haven't slowed down that much in creating new podcasts. So do you think the rate at which we're introducing new products is going to...
I don't think so. I don't think it will slow. I mean, generative and agentic AI have changed the product development space. There's no doubt about that, right? It's democratized access to design, code, testing, scaling. I think the bigger thing is it's removed any barrier to experimentation.
Yeah.
Any company, a 4-person company, can start building a product and put it into the hands of the user that can compete with a huge corporation, right? So I don't think that necessarily will slow down. I think it's a combination of, again, the key characteristics of your team and having a well-planned, product strategy and understanding of what it is that you're building, who you're building it for, an approach. So you're not just building something for technology's sake.
And I also imagine that like the true differentiator in the future will maybe be the branding and the marketing of that product.
I think marketing is always going to play a huge, play into it. But how many times have you downloaded an app or you've fallen for one of the clickbait, amazing marketing things, and then the app is, horrible, right? Or the product's horrible and just missed expectations. So I think, marketing is obviously going to be a huge component, but at the end of the day, right, do you have an experience that's going to really land with your customers? And are you delivering value, not just to your, company and your organization, but to your companies, to their users and to society?
Yeah. Matt, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. It's been really, really great talking to you.
Thanks so much. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy to be in Cleveland. It's been a great conference.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hey Lily, did you know that Mind the Product is the media partner for the Inspire Africa Conference, Africa's largest tech product conference?
That's exciting, and this is the third year for the conference, happening from 14th to the 17th of October in Kigali, Rwanda.
There's 4 days to enjoy, including a masterclass from the fine folks at Silicon Valley Product Group and a Founders Town Hall. We'll be talking with a number of the speakers on the podcast over the next few weeks, So watch for that.
And learn more at inspireafricaconference.com. The Product Experience hosts are me, Lily Smith, host by night and Chief Product Officer by day.
And me, Randy Silver, also host by night. And I spend my days working with product and leadership teams, helping their teams to do amazing work.
Luron Pratt is our producer, and Luke Smith is our editor.
And our theme music is from product community legend Arnie Kittler's band, POW. Thanks to them for letting us use their track.